I'd like to invite one more representative of the Arizona community to come to the podium to give his words of support. He is chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, Robert Graham. If you'd come forward, please.
All right, thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's interesting when you hear the speeches that we've heard today, you hear of the evil and the darkness that has come by a regime that's ruling with this theocratic dimensions and abuse that put people in repression and oppression. So we had the great opportunity as well to participate last year, and then we had the opportunity to go to Paris. And I want to paint a picture for you because I think the human element is one of these things when we talk about this destruction, the assassination of the people, the pains and the torture that's happening in Camp Liberty and other places in Iran, sometimes we don't make the connection with the people. And so we hear it and we see it on the news and we become desensitized to it. We go get in our cars and we drive away and life changed for us. And we recognize the freedom and sometimes we don't. We take it for granted. When we were in Paris and we were being bused to this convention center, to give you the perspective of the size and the magnitude of this event, you walk into this hall and there's over 132,000 people in this hall. And what do they want? They want freedom. Outside the hall, there were buses and buses and buses and people on the grass laying around. There was probably an equal number of people outside the event. And why were they there? See, what we are talking about here is we're talking about freedom. Our military understands freedom. People that lived in a free Iran understand the notion of freedom. But when you think about the youth and the children and the people that have grown up in this type of leadership that's under the current regime, they do not have the perspective that we share. And it's hard to motivate people when they really don't understand the blessings of liberty. So when you look around and you think what happens, it's an idea of trying to introduce the perspective to people so that people can find strength and be motivated by freedom and the energy that comes with it. The allowance of being creative, the allowance of being innovative, the allowance to speak out if you don't necessarily agree with somebody, and you can be civilly disobedient without being killed or tortured. See, we talk about 120,000 people here. We talk about the 1,200 people that have been executed. Those are the people we know about. If you meet our Iranian American friends here and our Arizonans here and you listen to their stories, we had one of our people die that lives in Prescott. They were killed. They were murdered. If you talk to our neighbors here, the Iranian Americans, they'll tell you about cousins and uncles and dads and husbands and children that disappeared, or were murdered publicly, or humiliated, or dismembered. And it becomes real because you hear their story. We sat in a round table in Paris the day after the event, and we listened to a woman tell a story about her husband being killed, and she literally carried her children over the mountains as a refugee to become free, because she was afraid that her children and she would meet the same fate of her husband. That's not some story we read in the newspaper. When you look in her eyes and you see the hurt and the pain and the tears, it becomes absolutely real. We so casually talk about freedom in so many ways, we don't engage in it every day. When we talk and we share about these stories and we find an intimate way to engage in the process, it becomes real to us. And then you start to have those real stories that you can apply to your lives that you can do it. My wife and I last week stood on the Syrian border and watched mushroom clouds going off. We heard gunshots. We saw it right in front of us last week. It wasn't something that I was watching on TV. It was right in front of me. The smell, the sound, and the sight. It's not something that's far away from us. It's here. And it's an influence and an impact on the world that's trying to destroy freedom so that people can maintain power, and absurd regimes so they can destroy people and people's self-worth. Currently, you have Khomeini. And Ayatollah Khomeini, when he was the leader back in the Iran hostage crisis, he had his pupil, Khomeini, right? And he went to the Ayatollah and said, here we've got these hostages, what should we do with them? You know what Khomeini's question was back to him? Are you afraid of America? And what do you think he said? He said, no, He said, then keep them. This is a culture and a leadership that understands two things, and that's force and fear. And you look at it and you say, force and fear. Yes, force and fear, look at what they're doing. They're trouncing on a weak American president and leader that doesn't have any footing to stand and push back. So what do? How do we change that? Well, look around. You heard this notion, this cry for unity today? A unified voice and a movement can topple governments, especially when it has righteous intent behind freedom and the blessing of liberty. So how are you active? What are you doing? Some of you are here for the first time. Read more. Learn. Talk to people that you know that are Iranian Americans. Listen to them. Understand this movement of fundamental Islam and this whole notion of radical Islam and what it's doing. And how can you combat it? If you don't educate people next to you, you don't engage them in action, we will sit idly by and watch the destruction of our freedoms here in this nation as well. The nuclear proliferation, you think about a bomb going off and we hear the horrors behind the bomb, but if they have nuclear arms, they have leverage to push and the whole geoeconomic free markets that we have in that whole region all the way back to it impacting us. So again, it's a real battle that's worthy to engage. But it goes back to this unified voice, unified message, unified movement to do what? To establish freedom, to maintain freedom, and defend against tyranny. We have to do it. If we don't lead the fight, no one's going to engage in it. We have to stand up and push back in a way that's aggressive, that adopts force and fear, because it's a unified movement that's a groundswell that can topple governments. So I encourage you to engage in the process. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. My family, we're engaged in this movement. And we will fight because we understand the blessings of liberty. We've seen tyranny. We've seen the destruction of people, lives, and families. And it's time to stop. We need to engage. If our president's not going to lead, we need to show him what it means to be a representative republic. And we need to represent ourselves and fight for freedom across this world. Thank you very much.